Okay, hi BookTube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I thought I'd start a library tour for 2023. I started one last year, I managed to get a few instalments in, and then for some reason I thought it would be a good idea to reorganise my bookshelves a little bit partway through a library tour, so I lost my way a little bit. But with it being a new year, I thought I would start again, and I'm starting in a totally different place. So I'm over here at a different bookshelf, and I'll start with this top shelf here that you can see. It's mainly mythology, folklore, things like that, but there are one or two other things that are there for uh, pretty much just aesthetic reasons, and we'll start with a couple of those. So in the corner here we've got some Everyman's Library editions I like to keep together. So this first one here is some Albert Camus, so it's a collection of his writings. So we've got The Plague and the Fall, so two novels, and Exile in the Kingdom, which I believe is some short stories, and then there's some selected essays as well. And I really only got into Camus last year. I read The Stranger, or The Outsider as it was in my translation, and The Myth of Sisyphus. And there is just something about him that makes me want to sit up and pay attention. But he seems really, really honest. You know, he feels like it feels like he really has to say what he's saying, but he does so quite carefully, quite respectfully, really articulately. And so, yeah, there's just something to him that makes me want to keep exploring. So I've got plenty here to explore in the future. Next up, we've got some Edgar Allan Poe, his complete stories. He was one of those writers that really excited me when I first started reading, and then I didn't really touch again afterwards. Yeah, I might have read a few things when I was at university or something, but other than that, I haven't really read much by Poe. I've got his Tales of Mystery and Imagination somewhere, but I picked this up just to sort of reignite my love for his writing and just that wonderful dark kind of world that he inhabits. And so I've already found that every now and then I've been just popping over to this and reading a story or two. So yeah, hopefully I'll continue to do that, and I'll just get to know him a little bit better. And then really into the ancient classics and the mythology and stuff like that. We've got the Iliad by Homer. This is the Robert Fitzgerald translation. Is it Robert Fitzgerald? Yes, the Robert Fitzgerald translation. And yeah, I really quite liked it. It felt heightened. It felt like an epic, but it wasn't inaccessible. So this is the only translation of the Iliad that I've read. So I'm not the person to say whether it's the best, but I got by with it, and I thought it was still really entertaining, and everything in there felt really captivating and really real. So yeah, it couldn't be that bad. Then we've got the Odyssey. This is a different translator. This is the Emily Wilson translation, and I really enjoyed it. There was a kind of spark to her translation, maybe a little more energy to it than I felt in Fitzgerald's translation of the Iliad. But obviously I'm not the person to say whether it's a better or worse translation. As an object, I really love this book. It feels really nice. It's got the deckled edges and the French flaps, and it's got sort of maps and things. So I just as an overall experience, I really enjoyed reading this. If Emily Wilson comes out with an edition of the Iliad, I'd be really interested in reading that, and I'd quite like to try the Fitzgerald translation of the Odyssey as well, just to compare them and see which I prefer overall. And then there's plenty of other translations I can go to, but yeah, they're the two I'm going to try and explore, but I'll have to wait for Emily Wilson to actually translate the Iliad first, if she ever does. Then sort of staying in sort of the classics of Greece and Rome, we've got The Metamorphosis by Ovid. Haven't read this yet, so don't really have too much to say about it, but it's on my short list of books that I'd like to read this year. So probably out of all the books on the shelf here that I haven't read, this is the one at the top of the list, really. Then next we've got The Toyne, so an Irish epic, a saga, a really random, crazy story about a cattle raid and then a kind of war that follows it, and it's really violent and over the top, but just brilliant. And there's something in the energy of the storytelling in just stories like this. It's kind of there in things like the Iliad, and in some of the Norse stuff in the Icelandic sagas. There's just this energy to the storytelling that you don't get in novels or sort of anything else since. There's just something to them that I just really enjoy, and there's a few more things that kind of fall into that bracket. So in a very similar world, we've got early Irish myths and sagas. So these are stories that would probably go around the Toyne in the same kind of story cycles and things like that. And I'm sure there's plenty else from elsewhere. And I've only really dipped into this so far, so I'd like to get to know it a little better. Next up, we've got the Lays of Marie de France, so some medieval romances. I think these were initially written in verse, but this is a prose translation by Glenn S. Burgess and Keith Busby. And I think I read a couple of these lays for university in this translation, so I know I'll get on with them, but ideally I would prefer to read a verse translation, but we'll see how I get on with those. Next up, we've got the Kalevala by, it was sort of put together by Elias Lönnrot. It's sort of the national Finnish epic, and it's wonderful. It's really weird. It's kind of unlike any other epic or any other mythology I've encountered. The gods, the deities all seem they're kind of distant but still active. So in a way they're quite different to like the Greek gods, who are incredibly active and loud and have really strong personalities. You don't really get that with the deities. In here, they're off in the sky, and then a hero will be in trouble and will kind of plead to them, and the deity will kind of sort of give them the power to overcome whatever trouble they're in. And there's only one or two places where you kind of actually meet a deity kind of physically, or they're kind of described physically. Otherwise, they seem to be more like a presence in the sky. But yeah, they're just really, really weird stories, and yeah, kind of unlike anything else on this shelf. Really, they're just brilliantly unique. Sort of in a similar area, then we've got the sagas of Icelanders, so some Icelandic sagas. I picked this up again. We've got some more deckled edges. I picked this up for Sagalong last year, and we read Egil's Saga, and that was really, really fun. So if we end up doing some more reading of the Icelandic sagas this year. If it happens again this year, then I'll be more than happy to read along. Into some Arthurian stuff now. So we've got the Acts of King Arthur and His Noble Knights by John Steinbeck. So this is his retelling of the Arthurian romances. I haven't read this yet. My brother got it for me a few months ago. So at some point I think I'll do a bit of an Arthurian binge and just fall down that rabbit hole, but I'm not sure exactly when I'll make the time for it. And then we've got the Mort d'Arthur by Mallory. I read a couple of the sections from this. I think I must have read, what did I read? Certainly read the sort of Lancelot and Guinevere section. Can't remember what else I read, but yeah, from what I remember, it's entertaining. The language isn't really that, it's different, but it's not, sort of totally inaccessible. but I certainly haven't read the whole thing, and I need to rectify that at some point. Then next up, something that's a little closer to home. Let's try and get these so they don't all fall over. I've got the Mabinogion. So these are Welsh legends, story cycles. There's 4 main branches, and then some stories that kind of go around them. And yeah, I don't really know it as well as I should. There's 1 or 2 branches that I know quite well, that I was taught a lot in school and read in uni and kind of kept coming back to. But other than that, as a whole thing, I don't know it as well as I should, so I need to really give this a deep dive as well. But it always feels quite special, because some of the places, particularly in the story of Branwyn, are quite close to where I grew up. So it's nice to have that sort of geographical sort of relationship to places that are mentioned in such such an old piece of literature. It's quite cool. Then next up, we've got The People of the Sea by David Thompson. So this is a guy just talking about, well, he's going around and visiting people who tell stories of the seal folk, or the Selkie, and it really becomes like a love letter to these communities. And these are communities that are gone now. The people have moved away. The houses are dilapidated. And it's just really, really great. I mean, the stories themselves are just wonderful and enchanting, but just the way that that David Thompson just kind of falls in love with these places and the people telling these stories is just a wonderful thing to see. So I'd really recommend this. It's a really lovely book. Then next up, we've got Maid Marian by Thomas Love Peacock, so of Nightmare Abbey fame and the war song of Dinas Fawr. And it's just a little novel he wrote about Maid Marian and Robin Hood and all of that. I can't remember too much about it. From what I can remember, it had plenty of gusto, and it was funny and entertaining, but sort of other than those sort of rather vague memories, I don't remember much else, so I need to give it another go at some point. Next up, we've got Tales of Old Japan, collected by A.B. Mitford, maybe retold by A.B. Mitford, and it's folklore, fairy tales, ghost stories, and legends of the samurai. And I just got this because so much of what I have here is sort of European stuff, and sort of other than that, I'm not really too familiar with literature from much further away than that. Really, it's something I really need to rectify. But this has been sitting on the shelf for ages, and I'd really like to make some time for it. There's some really, I'm flicking through. Sorry, I'm being quite selfish and not showing you, but there's just lots of really great illustrations in here as well. At some point I do really need to read this. Maybe I should make this a priority for a little later this year, because it's been sitting on my shelf too long. Speaking of sitting on my shelf too long, this is Angela Carter's Book of Fairy Tales. So this is just her own sort of, I suppose, like a personal sampling of fairy tales from all over the world, and it's got that gothic sort of dark twist, probably, that we all know and love from Angela Carter. And I can remember picking this up on a day when I just walked to a bookshop, and with the core mission of just buying a book, to give myself a present. I bought it. I thought it was really, really cool, and then it's just been sitting on the shelf. And again, it's got loads of really lovely illustrations. If I can find one. Well, there we've got some kind of large cat and a human hand. Don't really know what that's about, but if I actually open it up and give it a read, I'll find out. Then these next 3 are all pretty similar. They're all sort of collections of folklore and things like that. So we've got Scottish myths and legends. We've got Scottish ghosts and ghost stories, and Welsh folk tales. I've dipped into this one a little bit. They're just the kind of things that you want to have around, and yeah, they're just fun to dip into every now and then. And then finally, we've got another one which isn't mythology at all. It's just there for purely aesthetic reasons. It was just a nice place where it fits. This is A Life of William Shakespeare by Sidney Lee. So a really old, beaten up copy. Let's see who it's published by. Published by John Murray. What is that word? Albemarle Street, London. Oh dear, I wasn't prepared to to pronounce that, but yeah, it's just an old biography of William Shakespeare. The thing that kind of gets me a bit excited and a bit geeky, so excited and geeky that I can't speak, is that there's still some uncut pages. So in the preface at the beginning, whoever read this thought they didn't really need to read the preface, so there's still some uncut pages there, and some of the pages at the back for the last few chapters as well haven't been cut either. And so yeah, I'm looking forward maybe for September, for Shakestember this year, reading A Life of William Shakespeare with a sharp knife at hand, so I can cut through the pages when I need to. But there we go, that is the end of the first instalment of this library tour. I'm hoping that it all went okay. I had to film this a couple of times because for some reason the first time the sound didn't work, so I'm hoping the sound has worked and that you're actually seeing this. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.